1935 to 1940, no one knew much about Harry S. Truman, the self-effacing, simple U.S. Senator from Missouri. But in March of 1941, his oversight of the U.S. government's defense expenditures launched his reputation as an effective, fair, honest politician who was above reproach. Before and during World War II, Congress had allocated $10.5 billion to strengthen U.S. military bases and equipment. To see for himself if these monies were being used honestly and wisely, Truman embarked on a 10,000-mile road trip, and what he saw alarmed him. Senator Truman witnessed many dishonest and unsavory examples of wasteful government spending, including men, hundreds of men just standing around collecting their pay and doing nothing, and construction materials sitting in the snow, just getting ruined. When he returned to Washington, Truman proposed a special committee to investigate the country's defense contracts, and on March 1st, 1941, Congress unanimously approved the special committee to investigate the National Defense Program. But it quickly became known as the Truman Committee. Resisting pressure from President Roosevelt to stack the committee with New Deal Democrats, Truman insisted from the get-go that a bipartisan team of men that he considered to be practical and honest, regardless of party affiliation, be on his team. Adhering to a fact-based approach, Truman was heard often to say, "There is no substitute for facts." Committed to the truth, the 5-foot, 10-inch bespectacled Spitfire senator from Missouri was also committed to the American people. Working as a benevolent policeman, guarding against wartime abuses, Truman explained his stand in a 1941 NBC national radio address. This committee is a bipartisan one and has adopted a policy of making a thorough inquiry of the subjects it undertakes to investigate without prejudice or bias. There will be no attempt to muckrake the defense program. Neither will the unsavory things be avoided. The welfare of the whole country is at stake in the successful conclusion of our national defense policy. Where there has been so much haste in the expenditure of such enormous sums, there are bound to be leaks and mistakes of judgment. Many people believe in both patriotism and profits, but sometimes, unfortunately, profits come first with them. With an initial budget of $15,000, Truman appealed to the American public to write the Oversight Committee if they saw defense-related waste in their communities. These citizen letters were faithfully read by the Truman Committee and were often a starting point in their investigations. Quickly, honestly, and effectively, Truman's committee spotted and stopped excessive spending by contractors hired for military housing projects, saving the government an estimated $250 million. By the fall of 1941, barely 6 months after the committee's instigation, their budget was increased to $50,000, as was their discovery and extinguishing of government waste, including their finding that the Carnegie Illinois Steel Corporation had sold faulty slabs of steel to be used in shipbuilding. Their detection that defective engines made by the Curtiss Wright Company and used in airplanes led to the death of student pilots. And their finding that some companies that had exclusive patents or monopolies on critical war materials had intentionally slowed the development of substitutes or created artificial shortages, and much, much more. It is conservatively estimated that Truman and his committee spent less than $1 million and saved the U.S. government between $10 and $15 billion, as well as saving thousands of lives by uncovering defective equipment and materials that were to be used by troops and unsafe conditions at plants where wartime materials were being manufactured. They were also credited as shortening the war by streamlining federal contracting practices. All 432 public hearings were open to the attendance by all senators, and nearly 1,800 witnesses called to testify were treated with respect. The Truman Committee not only uncovered substantial misuse of government funds, but they also helped build the public's trust in Congress. Eventually, Truman and his team's honest, hard work attracted attention from the mainstream media, and in March of 1943, Time magazine, a highly respected publication back then, featured investigator Truman on its cover with the accompanying article quoting one Washingtonian as saying, "There is only one thing that worries me more than the present state of the war effort, and that is to think what it would be like now without Truman." In 1944, Truman stepped down as chairman of the committee to focus on the presidential election. He'd been chosen as FDR's running mate, primarily because of his oversight work. Over 20 years later, in an interview with Wilbur Sparks, who served as a lawyer on the Truman Committee, the attorney offered his assessment of the group's work. History may very well show that never before or since has there been a congressional committee which conducted itself in such a nonpartisan manner. The bipartisan culture of the honest efforts of the Truman Committee that began in 1941 cannot be overstated or forgotten today.